The announcement of the Gauteng provincial executive was postponed last night. This after negotiations between the ANC and DA deadlocked yet again. Let's now welcome Dr. McKinley, who is a political analyst, to give us a little bit of more insight as to what he thinks could be leading to this, of course, debacle. Doctor, as always, thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon to you. So what are you reading into the said deadlock between the ANC and the DA in the announcement of the provincial executive for the second time now?
Yeah, good afternoon, Alicia, and to your viewers as well. I put this down to two particular things.
Yes, go ahead, Doctor.
Sorry, I think we have a delay in our communication.
Yes, go ahead, Doctor.
Okay, I was saying I think we can put this down to two particular things. The one is political egos. I think both Panyaza Lesufi and Sali Musamanga are generally like bulls in a crawl. They both want what they want the maximalist positions. Their demands are there, and they're almost like they're clashing egos, and they don't want to back down or seem to be weak. The second thing is the internal politics within the ANC between ANC Gauteng and the ANC National. And I think that this has been going on for quite some time, differences of opinion about coalition governments, about particularly bringing the EFF on board in Gauteng. And I think that's also playing itself out. And then the third aspect, I would argue, is degrees of political immaturity. I think what we saw in the national government, however one wants to criticize the ideological makeup of that GNU, what we saw was compromise. We saw people basically stepping back, realizing that they couldn't get everything they wanted, that they needed to compromise, and they took the time and they found each other, and that's why we have a national GNU. My sense is that at the moment, at least in Gauteng, both of the sides are unwilling to do that, and as a result, we see these delays.
Doctor, I mean, speaking of political maturity, right, do you think these types of public spats are actually healthy, especially at such a critical moment where the whole country and even the world is closely following all the developments pertaining to this GNU and what we could actually expect from it going forward? Because the issue is how different these parties are in the policies. There's always been something that even analysts said if this wasn't resolved right at the beginning of the negotiations as well as talks to be part of the GNU, I mean, could potentially lead to the current impasse.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, the nature of coalitions or the nature of the GNU itself is about finding each other, and it's going to be difficult. This is the first time in 30 years that political parties, and particularly the ANC, has had to do this. And I think they're finding it very, very difficult to swallow. They're finding it difficult to back off and not have what they want. And the DA is trying to, at least in the Gauteng situation, the DA is trying to do the same, or at least push their weight around a bit. But I think that in this case, we need to remind the politicians and remind the world as well that essentially the electorate, they delivered this result. And basically that result demands that the parties find themselves. I don't think anybody sees a problem with bringing on other parties in a GNU. All parties should have the opportunity to join that GNU, whether that's the EFF or whether any other party in Gauteng. But the big two, should we say, the big two, DA and ANC, have got to swallow their pride. And in that case, they need to put, we've said this many times, people have said it in the elections, you need to put the country and you need to put the interests of the people before your party, before your position, and before your own personal power. And this is what ANC Gauteng and the ANC DA, the DA in Gauteng is going to have to learn the hard way. Because if they basically do not, and if Panyaza Lesufi goes ahead and announces, for example, as the threat was to announce the cabinet irrespective of the conclusion of these talks with the DA, they're going to run into trouble down the road. That coalition government could collapse fairly quickly, and then we could be in a worse situation. So my advice, and I think many others' advice, is take your time. It's okay. It's been 30 years since we've had this situation. A couple more days is not going to kill us. Find each other, swallow your pride, and put the people first. If we do that, then the proper message, irregardless of what the governance mandate will be going forward, at least they'll have put the situation in a stable one, and people not only in South Africa but internationally will be able to see that our political class is at least woken up to the reality that the electorate has spoken and they must listen.
Doctor, you know what I find interesting, and I'd like to get your comment on this as well, is that we're getting these different views that are being thrown out in the public by the two parties that are supposed to be at the forefront of the formation of either, well, local government as well as national government. So that is out of the way. So, I mean, we left to speculate in terms of what are some of the discrepancies, because there was never an issue where transparency as well as ethical as well as formidable communication about some of these agreements that these parties were actually undertaking. So we basically left to speculate as to who is actually right, because I can tell you now, we also don't have those official documents as to which party signed what and who actually agreed to do what.
Well, this is part of our challenge and has been part of our challenge for quite some time in South Africa, which is lack of transparency, lack of honesty. The political parties have not had to, and particularly the ANC has basically had it their own way for too long. And they've basically been able to say, you know, when people have demanded that we want to see what's going on, they basically use all sorts of different kinds of rationalizations. In this case, we are speculating. We are in the dark, and it's wrong. It's not a situation. If the politicians, and I think the government of national unity at a national level was a little bit better. So what we found out, even though people were a bit frustrated by the delays and not knowing what was going to happen, there was communication. There was an indication that we're still talking. We're still trying to find each other. It's going to be difficult. We're not making any promises. But what we have instead here is we have the ANC spokesperson in Gauteng coming up and making new threats about pulling out and about going their own way. To me, this is childish behavior. It's immature behavior. It's like being in a playground and throwing the sand in the other child's eye and saying, well, you're not going to get your way. And I think this is a wake-up call to the politicians in Gauteng, that they cannot act as if this is the past. They can't act as if they still have, you know, can make all the shots on both sides. It's not simply just the ANC, but I think the DA too. And others. So in this case, they must be transparent. They must allow proper communication. They must bring people on board. Have they not learned the lesson of the last election? The lesson of the last election was, if you don't do the basic things right, people will punish you. And I think in that case, if the ANC Gauteng is listening to this, or for other commentary and everything else, they should listen very carefully and follow the people's will. And if they go down the path continued in the past of lack of transparency and secrecy, they're going to pay a much, much higher price than they did in the last elections.